The first time Claire Dawson looked at me that night, I thought she was angry. She stood across the crowded rooftop lounge in a dark blue dress, one hand wrapped around a glass of sparkling water she had not touched. Between us were 50 people, a jazz trio, 2 city council members, 3 television cameras, and a scale model of the biggest project my company had ever won. Everyone else was smiling. Claire was not. I had known her for 11 months. She lived across the hall from me, borrowed my drill twice, complained once about my smoke alarm chirping at 2 in the morning, and somehow always knew when I had skipped dinner. She was usually direct. If she had something to say, she said it. That night she just stared. Then my business partner, Dean Parker, lifted a pen beside the presentation table and called my name. "Ethan, we're ready for the signature." The room applauded. I started toward him. Claire moved faster. She crossed the room, brushed past an investor, and pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Read it before you sign anything," she whispered. Then she kept walking as if we barely knew each other. I opened the note behind the model building. "Do not sign. Your name is on a demolition order you never approved. Meet me in the service stairwell in 5 minutes. Come alone. Before I tell you what I found in that stairwell, think about this. If someone you trusted handed you proof that your whole life was built on a lie, would you face it immediately or protect what you had? Like, subscribe, and tell me below." I read the note twice. My first thought was that Claire had made a mistake. My second was that she had not. Claire worked as an investigative reporter for a local news site called the Harbor Ledger. She covered housing, city contracts, and the kind of quiet corruption that usually lived inside spreadsheets no one wanted to read. She had once spent 6 weeks proving a landlord had billed low-income tenants for repairs that were never made. She did not panic easily, and she did not make vague accusations. Dean called my name again, louder this time. He stood under the screen showing the words Harbor Point, a new future for the East Side. Beside him was Vanessa Cole, our communications director, and my former fiancée. She looked polished, calm, and exactly like the woman who had once told me I cared more about concrete than people. We had been apart for almost 2 years, but she still knew how to read every hesitation on my face. "You okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. Dean held out the pen. "Then let's make it official." The papers on the table were ceremonial partnership documents. At least that was what he had told me. Signing them would not authorize demolition, but Claire's note had turned every page into a threat. I looked toward the far side of the room. She was gone. "My attorney asked me not to sign public-facing documents without a final review," I said. Dean's smile tightened. "Since when?" "Since tonight." A few people laughed because they thought I was joking. I set the pen down. "Give me 10 minutes. Dean followed me with his eyes as I walked away, but he could not stop me without creating the exact kind of scene he had spent months avoiding. The service stairwell smelled like dust and industrial cleaner. Claire waited 1 flight down, holding a thick envelope against her chest. "You came," she said. "You made it sound like I was about to sign away my freedom. You might have been." She handed me the envelope. Inside were copies of city permits, a contractor authorization form, and a demolition clearance for 3 occupied buildings on Mason Street. My company logo appeared at the top. My electronic signature appeared at the bottom. I had never seen any of it. The clearance stated that all tenants had been relocated, all utilities had been disconnected, and all hazardous materials had been removed. I knew for a fact none of those things were true. I had toured the block 4 days earlier. Families were still living there. A daycare operated from the ground floor of number 118. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "A city employee sent it to me this afternoon. He thought the signature looked wrong." "It looks right. That's the problem." I studied the timestamp. The authorization had been filed at 11:42 p.m., the previous Sunday, while I was on a flight home from Denver. Claire opened her phone and showed me a screenshot of a calendar notice. "Demolition is scheduled for 6 Monday morning," she said. "The city system lists it as an emergency structural removal, which means there may not be another public review." It was Friday night. Why bring this to me instead of publishing it? Her jaw tightened. "Because if you approved this, I publish. If someone used your name, you have about 60 hours to stop them. And you trust me enough to give me those 60 hours? "No," she said. "I trust what I've seen you do when no one was watching." That answer hit harder than the accusation. For months, Claire and I had shared the small details of neighbor life without ever admitting they mattered. She knew I left for work before sunrise on concrete pour days. I knew she played old soul records when she was writing late. She had seen me carry groceries upstairs for Mrs. Alvarez in 4B. I had seen her sit on the curb with a frightened teenager after an eviction, waiting until the girl's aunt arrived. We were familiar enough to notice each other and cautious enough to pretend we did not. I looked back at the forged signature. Dean has access to my digital authorization, I said. So does our controller. And Vanessa? She manages filings when they involve public relations. She should not be able to authorize demolition. But could she send something under your account? I hated how easily the answer came. Yes. Footsteps sounded above us. Claire closed the envelope. I caught her wrist and pulled her behind the concrete wall beneath the stairs. We stood close enough that I could hear her breathing. Dean's voice echoed from the landing. Ethan? Claire looked up at me. Her eyes asked the question her mouth did not. Are you with me or not? I released her wrist. Go down to the garage, I whispered. I'll meet you by the north exit. What are you going to tell him? The truth he expects. That I needed air. And the truth he doesn't. That depends on what we find. She hesitated, then nodded and slipped down the stairs. I walked up alone. Dean was waiting on the landing with one hand in his pocket. You disappeared right before the cameras, he said. I told you I needed 10 minutes. You also refused to sign documents our attorneys cleared. Our attorneys cleared a ceremonial agreement. Nothing important changes if I sign tomorrow. His eyes dropped to the empty space where Claire had been standing. Was Dawson in here? I kept my face still. Why would she be? She's been asking questions about Mason Street. Reporters ask questions. Not usually at private parties. That was the first moment I knew Claire was right about more than the paperwork. Dean was not confused. He was afraid. I shrugged. Maybe you should have invited fewer reporters. He studied me for another second, then forced a laugh and clapped my shoulder. Come back inside. We can delay the signature, but don't make people nervous. I followed him into the party, stayed long enough to thank the investors, and told Vanessa I had a migraine. She offered to drive me home even though we lived in opposite directions. I'm fine, I said. You don't look fine. Long week. Her gaze moved toward the service hall. Did Claire say something to you? There it was again. Fear hidden under concern. She told me the music was too loud. Vanessa smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. That sounds like her. I left through the hotel kitchen and took the freight elevator to the garage. Claire waited beside my truck in a black coat she must have grabbed from the check room. She had traded her heels for flat shoes and pulled her hair into a loose knot. The change made the party upstairs feel like a stage we had both stepped off. You took 12 minutes, she said. You counted? I considered leaving at 11. Why didn't you? She looked at me for a beat too long. Because I thought you would come. We drove to my office on the west side. The city lights reflected off the river, and neither of us spoke for the first 5 minutes. I was going through every decision I had made with Dean over the past year, looking for the point where trust had turned into carelessness. Mercer Parker Construction had started with 2 used trucks and a rented garage. Dean and I met in college, worked for the same contractor, then built our own company after the recession. I handled field operations and design. He handled finance, contracts, and relationships with lenders. For 12 years, that division had worked. Lately, I had spent more time chasing projects and less time reading every filing. Harbor Point was supposed to change the city and secure our company's future. It included market-rate apartments, a public market, new sidewalks, and 2 buildings reserved for affordable housing. At least that was the plan I had approved. Mason Street was not supposed to be touched until every tenant had signed a relocation agreement and permanent replacement units were ready. Claire broke the silence. How much do you know about the emergency demolition request? Nothing. What about a structural report from Bellwether Engineering? I know the firm. I did not hire them. The report says all 3 buildings could collapse without warning. They've needed repairs for years, but they are not about to collapse. Our engineer inspected them in May. Can you prove that? Yes. If the files are still on our server. She watched me grip the steering wheel. You think someone deleted them? I think someone who forged my signature planned for me to ask questions. At the office, my keycard failed. I tried twice, then checked the reader. A red light flashed. Could it be a system problem? Claire asked. Our security app would notify me. I opened it. My administrator access had been suspended at 8:17 p.m., 3 minutes after Claire crossed the party. Dean had moved faster than I had. We need another way in, Claire said. This is my building. That was not an answer. I looked toward the loading bay. The old side entrance still used a physical lock because the replacement door had been delayed. My father used to say every building tells you how it can be entered, I said. Claire raised an eyebrow. Was your father a contractor or a burglar? Contractor. My uncle was the burglar. She almost smiled. It was the first breath of relief either of us had taken all night. I kept a spare key in a magnetic box under the steel stairs. We entered through the warehouse and climbed to the second floor. Most lights were off, but someone had left the conference room glowing at the far end of the hall. Claire touched my arm. Did you leave that on? No. We heard a drawer close. I motioned for her to stay back and walked toward the room. The door opened before I reached it. Josh Mercer stepped out carrying a banker's box. My younger brother was our chief financial officer. He had joined the company 3 years earlier after a decade in corporate accounting. He looked from me to Claire, then down at the box in his hands. Ethan, he said, I can explain. Start with why my access was disabled. That wasn't me. Then start with the box. Josh set it on the conference table. Inside were printed ledgers, external hard drives, and folders marked Harbor Point. I was getting these out before Dean destroyed them, he said. Claire closed the door behind us. Why would he destroy company records? Josh stared at her. This doesn't involve you. She's the reason I know someone filed a demolition order under my name. The color left his face. You knew, I said. I knew Dean was moving money. I did not know about the demolition order until this afternoon. And you didn't call me? I was trying to figure out how bad it was before I blew up the company. I stepped closer. Families are sleeping in those buildings tonight. I know. Then there was nothing left to figure out. Josh looked away. That hurt more than Dean's betrayal. Dean was my partner. Josh was my brother. Claire pulled out a chair. We can argue about blame after we know what's in the box. Right now, we need the original engineering report, the filing history, and proof of who used Ethan's credentials. Josh gave her a hard look. You planning to publish all of this? I'm planning to stop a demolition. What happens after that depends on what you did. Her answer was steady, not cruel. Josh sat down. For the next 2 hours, the three of us rebuilt the last 6 months. The first problem had started with a luxury hotel project in Nashville. A subcontractor defaulted, material costs rose, and Mercer Parker lost almost $4 million. Dean hid the loss from our lender because Harbor Point financing depended on our balance sheet. To cover the gap, he transferred money from tenant relocation accounts and delayed payments to 2 contractors. Then interest rates changed, another lender backed out, and the entire Harbor Point deal moved toward collapse. Dean's solution was to accelerate demolition. Once the Mason Street buildings were cleared, the land value would rise and a private equity fund would release emergency capital. The tenants were the obstacle, so he created a structural emergency, used my signature, and arranged for temporary hotel vouchers to appear as completed relocations. The vouchers had never been issued. Vanessa had prepared the public statement. I found the draft in an archived communications folder. It described the demolition as a painful but necessary action to protect public safety, and quoted me saying, "No building is worth risking a human life." I had never said those words. Claire stood behind my chair, reading over my shoulder. This goes out when? Monday at 6:15, Josh said. After the demolition begins, she said. So the images look inevitable, I answered. Josh rubbed both hands over his face. Dean said no one would be inside. He said the relocation team had handled it. Did you check? Claire asked. No. Why? Because I wanted to believe him. The room went quiet. I understood that answer because it was mine too. We found the original inspection report on one of the hard drives. It identified serious repairs but no immediate collapse risk. We also found metadata showing Vanessa had uploaded the false bellwether report from her home computer. Dean had approved the payment. What we did not find was proof that Dean had personally ordered the forged signature. The authorization log showed my account and my device certificate. He can say you did it, Claire said. He will. Josh pushed a folder toward me. There's more. Inside was a personal guarantee tied to Harbor Point. My signature was real this time. I had signed it 8 months earlier after Dean told me the exposure was capped at $1 million. The attached amendment made me responsible for the entire loan if fraud invalidated the company's insurance. $23 million. I looked at Josh. Did you know about this amendment? I found it yesterday. Is my signature on it? No. Dean signed under the authority clause in the original agreement. Claire lowered herself into the chair beside me. If you report the fraud, you could lose the company and everything you own. If I don't report it, people could lose their homes before breakfast Monday. I know. Her voice softened, but she did not tell me what to choose. That mattered. My phone rang. Dean. I put it on speaker. Where are you? He asked. At the office. Silence. Then he said, we need to talk privately. We're past private. Ethan, listen to me. The Mason buildings are dangerous. The city wants them down. The city wants the paperwork you gave them to be true. Another silence, shorter this time. You're upset, he said. Don't make decisions while you're upset. You used my signature. I used authority you gave me to save the company. You put families in danger. No one is going to be hurt. We move them this weekend. Demolition starts Monday. Financing closes Tuesday. And every dollar goes back where it belongs. Claire's face changed. She had heard what I heard. An admission wrapped in a plan. You filed false reports, I said. I fixed a timing problem. You committed fraud. His voice sharpened. And if you run to the city, you destroy 200 jobs, your brother's career, your own house, and every project we've promised to finish. Is that justice to you? I looked at Josh. He stared at the table. Dean continued. Come to my place. Alone. We can solve this. No. Then understand something. Claire Dawson has been investigating you for months. She did not hand you that paper because she cares about you. She handed it to you because she needed your reaction. Claire went still. Dean hung up. I turned to her. Is that true? Claire did not answer right away. That was enough to make the room feel colder. How long? I asked. 4 months? Josh gave a humorless laugh. Unbelievable. Claire ignored him. My editor assigned me to Harbor Point after tenants started receiving relocation notices that did not match the public plan. I reviewed property records, campaign donations, contractor filings, and complaints. Your name was on all of it because it's your company. You never mentioned that. I could not discuss an active investigation with the person running the company. But you could eat takeout in my kitchen. Pain moved across her face. That happened before the assignment. And after? After. I kept trying to separate the man across the hall from the executive in the records. Did you? Yes. How convenient. She stepped back as if I had raised my voice, though I had not. I did not record our private conversations, she said. I did not ask you questions about the project at home. I did not use anything you told me as a neighbor. When the permit came in today, I could have published your name and asked questions later. I came to you instead. Because you trusted what you saw me do when no one was watching, I said. I meant that. Or because you wanted access to my files. Her eyes flashed. I already had enough for a story. I did not have enough to stop Monday. I wanted to stay angry, because anger was simpler than humiliation. I had spent the last year noticing the light under her door, the coffee she drank, the way she laughed when she forgot to be guarded. I had believed those moments belonged to us, even if neither of us had named what us meant. Now Dean had placed doubt inside every one of them. Claire picked up her coat. You have the evidence. Call the city inspector and your attorney. I'll leave. She reached the door. Claire, I said. She stopped but did not turn. Did you know about the forged signature before tonight? No. Did you come to the party for the story? I came because you invited me 2 weeks ago. I remembered sliding the invitation under her door after talking myself out of knocking. She had texted back, I'll be there. Try not to hide behind the scale model all night. Then why were you staring at me? I asked. She finally looked over her shoulder. Because I was trying to decide whether handing you that note would protect innocent people or warn the man responsible. And what made you decide? You looked at Mrs. Alvarez when the waiter offered you champagne. You noticed she could not reach the tray, so you brought her a glass of water. No cameras were on you. That was when I knew. The detail disarmed me, because I had forgotten it happened. Josh stood. This is touching, but Dean is probably wiping the server while we talk. He was right. I looked at Claire. Stay. That is not an apology. No. It's me asking you to help until this is stopped. After that, I'll give you the apology you deserve if I can prove I deserve the chance. She considered me, then set her coat down. At 1:30 in the morning, I called our outside attorney, Linda Cho. By 2, she was in the conference room, wearing jeans, a sweatshirt, and the expression of a woman who had been awakened to discover her largest client was on fire. She reviewed the documents, made 3 phone calls, and told us the city's emergency line could pause the demolition only if an authorized company officer formally challenged the safety filing. That challenge would trigger an immediate fraud review and notify our lender. How long before the lender freezes our accounts? Josh asked. Possibly minutes, Linda said. Payroll is Monday. I understand. No, you don't. 200 people. I understand exactly, she cut in. I also understand that allowing a demolition based on false documents could put all of you in prison. Josh went silent. Linda turned to me. You are the only officer with enough independent authority to file the challenge without Dean's approval. If you do, you need to assume the company may not open Monday. I thought about our crews, project managers, drivers, and apprentices. I knew which foreman had a new baby and which estimator was caring for his mother. The company was not an abstract thing. It was hundreds of rent payments and grocery bills. Then I pictured the daycare on Mason Street. File it, I said. Josh stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. Give me until morning. I can move enough money to protect payroll. Moving money now will look like concealment, Linda said. I'm trying to protect employees. So am I told him. But we do not protect them by making them part of a crime. He stared at me, furious and frightened. Easy for you to say. You get to be the honest founder. I get to explain why I missed $4 million disappearing. You did miss it. So did you. He walked out before I could answer. Linda submitted the challenge at 2:47 a.m. At 2:51, the city marked the demolition order suspended. At 3:06, our bank froze Harbor Point funds. At 3:18, Dean sent a company-wide email announcing that I had suffered an acute personal crisis and was temporarily stepping away from leadership. At 3:22, Vanessa texted me. What have you done? I turned off my phone. Claire was standing by the window, watching delivery trucks move along the street below. The reflection made her look farther away than she was. You stopped Monday, she said. I may have stopped every Monday after it too. You did the right thing. That sentence will not cover payroll. No, it won't. She came closer but left a careful distance between us. My dad owned a hardware store in Ohio. A developer bought the block when I was 16. They promised every business a place in the new building. Then the financing changed, the project stalled, and the temporary relocation payments stopped. My parents lost the store and their house within a year. I had never heard her talk about her family beyond saying her mother lived near Columbus. Is that why you cover housing? It's why I hate phrases like necessary transition and unavoidable loss. Those words usually mean someone with power has decided someone without it can absorb the damage. I've used those phrases. I know. There was no accusation in her voice, which made the truth worse. I thought if I designed projects differently, I could prove development did not have to work that way, I said. Somewhere along the way, I started believing the plan was enough. I stopped checking whether the promises were real. Claire looked at me. What are you going to do now? Make them real. How? I don't know yet. That is the first honest answer you've given me tonight. I smiled despite everything. You really know how to comfort a person. I brought you soup when you had the flu. You left it outside my door with instructions not to return the container. You looked terrible. I was protecting the container. The smile reached her eyes this time. For a few seconds, the fear in the room loosened. We were standing close now. I noticed a small ink mark on the side of her hand and the tiredness under her eyes. She looked at my mouth, then back at me. The conference room door opened. Linda walked in holding her phone. The city wants a meeting at 9. Dean has counsel. You need sleep. Claire stepped away. The moment was gone, but not forgotten. I drove her home just before dawn. Our hallway was quiet, the carpet lit by the weak yellow light above the elevator. We stopped between our doors. You should know something, she said. My editor expects a draft by noon. My stomach tightened. Are you publishing? I have to report that the demolition was suspended and the filing is under review. That is public information now. Will you name me? You are listed on the order. I challenged it. I'll include that. People will read the first sentence and decide I tried to throw families into the street. I cannot hide your name because I care what happens to you. The word care hung between us. She continued. But I can be accurate, and I can give you a chance to answer every question. I wanted her loyalty and her honesty to be the same thing. They were not. When? I asked. 10 o'clock. I'll be awake. She reached for her doorknob. Claire. She looked back. I'm sorry I accused you of using me. You had reason to wonder. I had reason to ask, not to decide. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Get 2 hours of sleep, Ethan. She went inside. I stood in the hallway longer than I should have, staring at the strip of light beneath her door. Saturday became a sequence of calls, meetings, and doors closing. At 9, the city inspector confirmed the demolition pause. At 10, Claire interviewed me by video from her apartment while I sat at my kitchen table. Her questions were direct. She asked when I learned about the false filing, why my company controls had failed, and whether I would release the original engineering report. I answered all of it. At noon, her article went live under the headline "Demolition Halted After Developer Challenges Order Filed in His Name." It did not clear me, but it did not convict me either. It showed the documents, named the unanswered questions, and included statements from Mason Street tenants who had been told to pack without receiving new housing. By 1, my voicemail was full. Half the messages called me a criminal. The other half called me brave. Both versions felt too simple. Dean held a press conference at 3. He blamed a rogue administrative error, denied authorizing false documents, and announced that Mercer Parker's board had voted to remove me. We did not have a board with the power to do that, but television stations repeated the statement anyway. Then he released security footage of Claire and me entering our office after midnight. Vanessa posted a statement suggesting Claire had developed an undisclosed personal relationship with the subject of her reporting. Within an hour, Claire's editor removed her from the story pending an ethics review. I knocked on her door as soon as I saw the notice. She opened it with her laptop under one arm and anger burning through her exhaustion. "I never gave them that footage," she said. "I know." "How?" "Because you would not destroy your own career to protect mine." Her expression changed. "You believe me. I should have believed you sooner." She stepped aside and let me in. Her apartment was half-packed. 3 boxes stood beside the bookcase, and a suitcase lay open on the couch. "What is this?" I asked. "I was offered a job in Boston last month." The words landed with a force I was not prepared for. "You're leaving?" I had not decided. Now my editor thinks I crossed a line, and Dean has made me part of the story. Boston may be the only clean way forward. When? Tuesday. Tuesday was 3 days away. It was not a distant possibility. It was a ticket already purchased. "You never told me. You never told me you wanted to know." That was fair, and I hated it. My phone rang. Josh. He had found the missing proof. Dean had asked him to erase an internal voice memo from the company cloud. Josh recovered it from a backup. In the recording, Dean told Vanessa to upload the bellwether report, use my credentials, and make sure the public statement went out after the equipment arrived. Vanessa argued that tenants were still inside. Dean answered, "They'll leave when the fences go up." Claire listened twice. "That changes everything," she said. "It clears you too. The security footage was released to discredit the person who found the fraud. It helps. My editor still has to review our relationship." "What relationship?" I asked. She looked at me with a tired, sad smile. "Exactly. I wanted to tell her there was one. I wanted to say it had existed in hallway conversations. Soup containers, borrowed tools, and every time I listened for her key in the lock across from mine. But saying it then would have sounded like panic, a confession made because she was leaving. So I did something harder. "I need to finish this," I said. "Then I'm coming back, and I'm going to ask you not to go. Not because of the article, not because you helped me. Because across the hall stopped feeling like enough, a long time ago." She held my gaze. "Finish it first." The city scheduled an emergency public hearing for Monday morning. Before it began, I sent the voice memo, server records, and financial ledgers to investigators. I also signed an agreement placing my shares in Harbor Point into a restitution trust for the tenants and employees affected by the fraud. Linda warned me it could cost nearly everything I owned. "Do it," I said. At the hearing, Dean sat beside 2 attorneys. Vanessa sat 3 rows behind him, pale and rigid. Mason Street tenants filled the room. Claire stood near the back with no press badge, only a notebook. Dean denied the recording was complete. Then Vanessa stood. "I have the complete file," she said. Every head turned. She walked to the clerk's table and handed over her phone. She admitted uploading the false report and drafting the statement. She said Dean had threatened to expose unrelated mistakes that would end her career if she refused. It did not excuse what she had done, and she did not ask for forgiveness. Dean's attorneys stopped whispering. By noon, the city had canceled the demolition permit, suspended Mercer Parker from new contracts, and referred the evidence to state and federal investigators. Dean was escorted out through a side door. Vanessa agreed to cooperate. Josh resigned and accepted responsibility for failing to report the transfers sooner. The company did not survive in its old form, but the people did. Our lender released enough money for payroll after I surrendered my ownership in 2 completed properties. A group of senior employees helped form a new firm to finish active safety work under court supervision. The Mason Street tenants received binding relocation guarantees, and the original buildings were repaired while the affordable units were completed. At 6 that evening, I went home. Claire's door was closed. Her suitcase stood beside it. I knocked. No answer. I called. straight to voicemail. For one terrible second, I thought Tuesday had become Monday. Then the elevator opened, and Claire stepped out carrying coffee and a roll of packing tape. She stopped when she saw me. "You're still here?" I said. "So are you." I took a folded piece of paper from my pocket and handed it to her. She opened it. "Across the hall is too far. Have dinner with me tonight. If that goes well, stay and have breakfast with me tomorrow. After that, we choose one day at a time." She read it twice, the way I had read hers at the party. "You wrote this during a city hearing?" she asked. "During a recess. That explains the handwriting. Is that a yes?" She set down the coffee. "Boston offered me a job. You are offering me breakfast. I can add benefits. Such as, I return borrowed containers. Eventually." She laughed, and the sound broke the last hard thing between us. Then she stepped closer. "I turned down Boston this afternoon," she said. "Not for you. My editor reinstated me, and I want to finish the tenant follow-up here." "Good. But I would like dinner." "Good. And breakfast." I kissed her before I could reduce the moment to another careful answer. It was not dramatic or perfect. My shoulder hit her door. She laughed against my mouth, and someone's dog barked from the end of the hall. It was real, which was better. 3 months later, the old rooftop lounge hosted a smaller party for the reopening of the first repaired Mason Street building. Claire had published the full investigation with another reporter, making every source and personal boundary clear. I was working with the employee-owned firm and earning less money than I had in years. I slept better. Across the room, Claire caught my eye. She lifted a folded piece of paper. I did not wait for her to cross the crowd. I went to her. The note said, "Dance with me before someone needs saving." So I did. Sometimes the person who changes your life does not arrive with a speech. Sometimes she lives across the hall, notices what you do when no one is watching, and hands you the truth before you are ready. The question is whether you protect your image or become the person she believed you could be. What would you have done? Share your answer and subscribe for more stories about love, courage, and second chances.